Hello everyone, my name is The Fox. This is going to be my review on Anbernic's latest device, their RG405V. Thank you very much to Anbernic for sending this out to me for review. Very quickly, this device is actually one of my favorites that they've made in terms of their vertical orientation. This device has absolutely outrageous battery life. When we're looking at lower end emulation, something like PlayStation 1 emulation, and we turn the fan off and have medium brightness, what you're going to find is that this device is able to have 17 hours of battery life. I'm going to say that one more time. 17 hours of battery life. That is absolutely an insane amount of battery life. Now, this is on the better end of battery life, obviously. The worst end of battery life, like if we were to play PlayStation 2 emulation, pump the brightness up all the way, and make the fan go to the max, we're going to get somewhere around 4 hours of battery life. But even at 4 hours of battery life, as a worst case scenario, that is still pretty good battery life. Going up to something like 17 hours of battery life is god tier battery life. So this device, how large it is, and I think a lot of people are going to be commenting on how big this device actually is, and being one of the negatives that they see about it. For me, I don't really mind how large it is, but it's going to be kind of weird on where you're going to be placing this in your bag or of some sort. However, I really like this device for a few different reasons. Number one is that they were able to cram that giganto battery on there. The other thing in here is this very large 4x3 display here. And this is really the two-factor part of it that I really love about this device. Overall, there are some things that are not so great. The analog sticks aren't perfect. We'll touch more about that in the review proper. Let's first talk about the specs on the device. Once again, talking about the screen, we're looking at a 4-inch IPS touchscreen that has a resolution of 640 by 480, T618 SoC. The most important bit are the dual-core A75 that are on there that are going to be largely driving the emulation on this particular platform. The GPU is a Mali G52 at 850 MHz. We are looking at 4 GB of LPDDR4 XRAM at 1866 MHz. The built-in eMMC storage is at 128 GB of capacity. You can also expand this using the microSD card slot, and they sell those in a few different configurations on their site. For Wi-Fi, we do support 2.4 and 5 GHz Wi-Fi, and for Bluetooth, we go up to Bluetooth 5.0. The operating system is Android 12, and we do have the Android Play Store support on this device. Thermally speaking, this device doesn't really get too hot, even when we are trying more demanding games like PS2 or GameCube emulation. Now, it remains to be said that the T618 chip that is on this device is not going to play every PS2 and every GameCube game. There are going to be many GameCube and PS2 games that are not going to play on this device. So you're going to have to navigate that yourself and see which games will run. And you're also going to have to try to take a look at running games that are the PAL versions of GameCube games or the PAL versions of PS2 games. Those games will run at 50 Hz. And while that is at odds with the display, what is running at, which is 60 Hz, emulation really needs it to be running in line so that you don't have any audio stutters at all. So that is one avenue that you can navigate to try to play some games just to get it across the finish line so you can actually play it. But again, this is going to be an area where you're going to have to navigate that yourself to see what is comfortable enough for you to play. Anything below that is pretty much going to be easy. You're going to see Dreamcast emulation that is playing right here. What's funny is Dreamcast emulation is actually easier to emulate than, say, something like the Sega Saturn. Even though the Dreamcast came out later than the Sega Saturn, running Sega Saturn in an accurate way actually requires a fair amount of horsepower. And this device, you're going to find some games that aren't going to be able to play, especially when we talk about like Beetle emulators for Saturn, which are necessary for some games to play because of copy protection. Otherwise, you're going to have some problems there. But otherwise, if you're just using Yabusha and Shiro, you're going to have an easy enough time to play those games. N64 and everything below that. Once you start getting into N64, you can actually start disabling the fan and increasing your battery life. Let's start going into my review proper, and then we'll finish up on my overall thoughts. All right, so let's start talking about the latest Anbernic device, the RG405V. Now, a lot of people looked at this device, and obviously it's comically large. It is a large device. Now, for what it's worth, I actually like large handhelds, and I don't think that this device is too big, but I know that when some people look at this device, they're going to look at it from an angle that it's just too big to be anywhere where they're going to put it, right? Where are they going to actually store this device? How are they going to throw it into their bag? Before we get into that, I just want to kind of talk about the fit and finish of this device, and there's a lot that we need to talk about. There's actually a lot of smart design that Anbernic did here. One of the big things that is standing out here is obviously this gigantic 4x3 screen. We are running Android, so there are going to be some things that we need to talk about as so far how Android wants the display on a 4x3 device, so there is going to be some squishing that happens when we're looking at some of the Android navigation. However, for playing retro games on this device, it really is sensational. The other thing that Anbernic has done really nice, you can see that I've already applied their included screen protector on here, and they have included a small indent so that the screen protector fits flush with the device. There's these little details that Anbernic really does very, very well that I love about what Anbernic does when Anbernic is banging on all cylinders. They do a lot of things that are really nice when they really when they start considering things. Here we have the micro SD slot. You can see a nice little alcove for their function button. This will bring up their launcher that is included on there, which for me, I don't really care, but I know that some people really like front ends. We have a nice little alcove for the power button as well as for the volume up and down. Along the top, we have our USB-C charging and data as well as the exhaust port for their included fan. The fan actually isn't very loud, even when you're pumping it to the max. There's a faint high pitch from far away. You can keep it on auto, which will auto-regulate the fan speed, and it's mostly inaudible. For the most part, I don't think it's super necessary. It is actually working because if we take a look at the thermal scans, especially when we take a look at the thermal heat that's exhausting out of the fans themselves, we can actually see that it is in fact doing work. So this is a sensible design for what they have. The only thing that I would say is that the fan blades themselves are not meant to be moved around. If you actually put it at max, you can hear it. I'm going to bring this across so that when you can hear it. The fan blades are not meant to be moved around. They're for stationary. So just keep that in mind if you are going to be using the fans themselves. Overall, it's not super necessary, and I have a different battery life test that we'll be talking about a little bit more, but I just want to kind of go over the fit and finish and the controls a little bit more now that we've been talking about the overall build quality. Now let's start taking a look at the analog sticks themselves. These guys are super sensitive, and they are very, very magnet heavy. They really want to snap to the cardinal sensors. So if I just press down, you can see how if I just press down or up, that it is almost operating as a D-pad, right? So you're going to get very, very specific inputs. And if you try to do anything like I'm trying to push upright and it wants to hug to these cardinal guardrails. So for my particular viewpoint, while we do have full range here, it is hard to paint this entire area in any particular way, and it wants to do these straight lines. So if you wanted to use these for anything that was analog, I think you're going to have a pretty bad time in terms of trying to finesse these analogs at all. However, based on the screen size itself, as you can see, it is a gigantic 4x3 screen, and we are D-pad dominant here. So what we're really looking at as these analog sticks are just additional accoutrement to the overall device for particular, maybe some PS2 games that you're going to want to play that you're going to be using the analog sticks. In that event, they are there to service that. But overall, I think this 4x3 display is really going to be servicing the retro game arena in its entirety. On the front of the device, we have this nice alcove for their back button. So you can either press it to go back, or you can hold it to basically press home. So you have press once for back, hold to go home, which is really nice. And then on the top left, we have their launcher button. From here, we can go ahead and then launch any particular game that we want. And this will go ahead and launch a RetroArch, and then we can start playing. And naturally, the 4x3 display is really going to be making these 4x3 retro games really stand out. This is a sensational large display for these older games. So I think really this is the star of the show, right? Kind of designing the entire design around the display itself. The other thing I want to talk about here are the triggers on the back. Now, if we take a look at something like the Miyoo Mini, right, in a size comparison of this device, it looks comically large next to something that is so comically small. Now, the one thing that I never really liked about the Miyoo Mini were these back buttons, in that they're almost impossible to actually use in any particular way. They function as function keys for me, but actually using them in the game whenever I really needed them to is not going to be something that I would actually enjoy using. Whereas the triggers on the back, what I'm doing is I'm able to press the triggers with the inner pads of my fingers and then also press the outer ones. And because of the design of the triggers themselves, it actually accompanies themselves really, really well. So overall, I think that this might be my favorite use of triggers on these types of devices that Anbernic and other companies have developed, where they kind of have this swoop to accompany the battery on the back. Overall, I think in terms of what you're looking at, this is Probably the best that they've ever done, largely because it is such a large device. At around $130, I'm actually a big fan of Anbernic's RG405V. Now, a lot of people may find this device to be too large. However, I would submit that the increased size means that the ergonomics have improved considerably. When we take a look at these trigger buttons, they're actually far easier to use in practice when actually playing games, as opposed to other vertical style devices that came out with these very cramped back trigger buttons on the back, placing them wherever they thought they could place them. When we think about this display driving the design principles for this particular device, overall, I think all the compromises that come along with designing something like this, they made really good choices all around. And something that I've already touched base in my review is all the little touches and how the screen protector gets placed in and the little alcove for everything. Again, for a device that is around $130, it is a budget Android handheld gaming device. And with that T618 chip that is in the latest round of budget handhelds that are out there, it is very performant and does a lot. Also, with everything that's kind of guided around here and with the compromises around this giant screen, I think they made a lot of really good choices. So it's really up to you to think that, to come to the decision if you want something that has these dimensions. Overall, I'm a big fan of it, but that's it for my review. Hopefully this was informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.